The world's most influential companies look to LEK Consulting to enable growth, prepare for the future, and increase their impact. If you're ready to be a part of a top strategy consultancy, the firm is actively looking to add to its team of 1,800 consultants across 20 global offices. At LEK, you'll work on a wide variety of business problems to help clients solve their most pressing issues, from revenue growth to M&A to performance improvement and more. In addition, you'll gain exposure to a range of industries and problem types, resulting in world-class career progression opportunities. Ready to start making an impact from day one? Learn more about current opportunities and apply today at lek.com or click the link in this episode's show notes.
Welcome to this episode of Strategy Simplified. Today we get to talk with Brendan Mullen, Managing Director at Secha Capital in Johannesburg, South Africa. Brendan and his team take a hands-on approach to the businesses that they invest in with their unique operator-investor model. Today we'll get to hear all about Secha, opportunities to join the firm, and Brendan's journey through finance, a Duke MBA, and Bain on his path to Secha as well. I hope you enjoy the discussion. Brendan, we want to thank you so much for joining us here today on Strategy Simplified.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor. I'm a fan of the podcast and the work that you do.
Oh, Brendan, thanks so much. We'd love if you could just kick us off here with a quick overview of who you are and your background.
Absolutely. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Secha Capital, which we'll get into in a moment. But I live in Johannesburg, South Africa, where I've been for about 10 years. I'm originally from Boston, but now married with two kids under 3, in case you hear any background noise at some point. I guess my professional background actually spans a gamut: campaign politics, then a hedge fund, then my MBA, clean tech VC, strategy consulting with Bain, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and the MBA at Duke, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and now kind of lower mid-market private equity impact in Africa. And I think if there's a through line through each stop, it's that I always felt a little bit of an outsider to each one. And I think that served me well I saw the best and worst of whether it be politics or finance or consulting, but also wanted to kind of tweak it to serve both its maximum potential, but also from an impact perspective, and to kind of crowd in more people at the table. And kind of took those lessons to co-founding Secha about 6 years ago, which I'm sure we'll get into in a moment.
Absolutely. Let's just go ahead and jump right there now. Tell us a little bit more about Secha.
Yeah, so Secha is a lower mid-market private equity fund in Southern Africa. A lot of words there, but it focuses on traditional industries making the green economy tech-enabled and or post-COVID transition. We employ a unique model called an operator-investor model, where concisely we second a team member into the portfolio company for a year to complement our growth equity checks. All right, so we started with a kind of a proof of concept fund, very small fund, rating small growth equity checks. Invested in, so today now we're on our second fund of $50 million. So more of a kind of proper fund size. We've invested in 11 companies, 8 of which are female founded. Average revenue growth is 12x. We've created over 200 jobs. Maybe to brag a little bit, our first investment, Native Child, has grown over 100x. And our first 3 Fund 2 investments are respectively in the renewable energy, agri-tech, and food security space. Happy to go further into what we've done and how we're differentiated. But I think that's a nice quick. Oh, and I should say we're focused on Southern Africa for Fund 2 in terms of our investments.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I would love if you could actually brag a little bit more. Would love to hear a few more of the details. You already mentioned Native Child, but you could speak a little bit more about that or others. What are some of the investments that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking me to choose my favorite child. But yeah, maybe 2 things to cover. So yeah, like I mentioned, we invested in a lot of women-founded and run companies, a lot in the female and beauty space. So Native Child was an interesting one. So that's natural hair care for women of color. So a niche growth vertical. The multinationals didn't understand the pain points. They don't have the authenticity to solve. But that and maybe for your listeners, as I mentioned, I'm from Boston. I'm a pretty stereotypical white guy, from America, and here I am talking about natural hair care, and I think that's kind of key. Our team looks different than me. We're young, we're diverse, and that's enabled us to kind of invest where others wouldn't understand and wouldn't take the time. So yeah, first investment, native child natural hair care for women of color, led us to wigs. Right. And I always joke I'm one of the few people probably from Boston that knows, or guys from Boston that knows the difference between a Brazilian and Peruvian wig, a 4x4 or a full frontal. I know the difference between 4C and 4B hair. And that's actually part of our kind of a secret sauce, those kind of unique insights for boots on the ground. So, we invested in this company, Hair Town, that is in the wig market. It's just massive. It's 3 times the size. South Africa alone is 3 times the size of the wig market in the US. And we co-created with the founder Wukina, which is Africa's Avon for wigs. So massively impactful. A lot of resellers, people can, primarily women would sell wigs as a side hustle. And then we sold that in a management buyout to our resellers last year. So that was pretty great. Not a massive exit for us, but we made some money. And now the women that were originally just resellers, your kind of Avon model, they own equity in the business. Maybe the second one, just to go on the other side of the spectrum, more of a recency bias, but interesting to talk about, is our second fund to investment, Culture Fresh. It's a hydroponic and environmentally controlled farm in the Western Cape. It's the biggest supplier of lettuce to the major retailers in the Western Cape, so here in South Africa and soon to be all of Africa. And I just think in a kind of a post Russia, Ukraine world, the way we do this industrialized farming as opposed to land farming, yes, we save 90% of water, our yields are much higher and faster, but we don't require synthetic chemicals, fertilizers as inputs. We actually, and since we're on the off grid, entirely solar and battery based, with one of actually such as other portfolio companies, we don't use energy from the grid, so it's just very clean. We don't the cost of fertilizers have gone up for land based agriculture, not us. It's we use biostimulants if any, and it's just it gives me hope that the future of food production, food security, is actually easily solvable with some industrialized techniques that kind of modernize the traditional land farmer.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. How diverse your portfolio is and what you've been able to get involved in your work here at Secha. So I caught that right. The size of the wig market in South Africa is 3 times the size of that market in the US?
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. And the farming work that you're doing, it's off-grid solar. Is that because it's hydroponic or?
Well, yes, and just because we like to, I guess as Secha, we follow kind of global trends and things you read about, and then try to adopt it at the local market, right? And so we can talk about how we're thesis driven, and maybe that's one of the ways. Because the sun shines a lot in South Africa, and land is cheap. So instead of vertical farming that you might find in Singapore, where I think there's a lot of them, and Equilibrium Capital's invested a lot there. Land is cheap and sun is plentiful. What we don't have is water, and what is expensive is fertilizers. So we kind of try to fit that. And so, primarily off grid there, by virtue of the cost. And then because our local grid provider is intermittent, let's be that way. And also that's what compelled Secha to invest in a battery storage player called iGen. Also the rare renewable company that's Black and female founded. And you mentioned kind of diverse, and I would agree, but these are all kind of more traditional industries that are evolving due to tech enablement, green economy, where like these changes are really hitting the bottom line. So it's not impact just for impact's sake, though our primary KPI is job creation. We do love that. But these businesses are making money in these times of transition. Put it succinctly.
What are some ways that you choose your investments? I mean, it just sounded like you spoke about, this led us to battery storage, power storage. Do you look for those linkages across your portfolio? What are some of the other key ways that you consider and evaluate possible investments?
Yeah, we like to say we invest in adolescent companies. So not startups, and that's where we are kind of. Maybe in the other parts of the world, you'd call it micro private equity or lower mid-market. But we like unsexy sectors, quote unquote. These companies are very sexy. And then seeing some sort of change that can be there. And that's why we're very thesis driven. When we decided on natural hair care, we met with 5 companies and the native child. Wigs, we met with 8 different wig companies. Battery storage, 4 or 5 different ones. And what we are ultimately looking for, I guess maybe there's 2 primary filters at the top. And I'll use native child as the first example. So that's a niche growth vertical adjacent to a very large market that, there can be an insurgent brand, or where a local player can understand the pain points or solve for something that a multinational cannot. Right. So that's whether that's native child understanding the local consumer, primarily young Black women, or culture fresh, solving for land farming in South Africa, where people have not adopted, hydroponics or environmentally controlled solutions. The other one would be a large fragmented market that can be reinvigorated. And that's, again, why that can be different. So that's the wig market. It's a huge market. There's not a lot of brand equity. Or the biltong market. So that's kind of like the beef jerky equivalent here in South Africa. Again, huge market, but there's not a lot of innovation. And in these high use case sectors, a little innovation goes a long way. And then, of course, we're not VC. We don't invest in winner take all. And we do kind of like investing in atoms that can leverage bits. So, a local producer, a local player can win as opposed to an importer, but we can still use some of that tech enablement component to modernize these companies.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit more what you mean by being thesis driven.
Yeah, sure. So Secha has been around 5-6 years now. We're not a brand. We're not expecting people to come to us dying to take our capital. And as we'll talk about the operator investor model, we are differentiated. So those are probably the 2 ways we are primarily differentiated. We do a lot of more of the work up front to come up with the idea of where is there an opportunity to invest. And then we look to see if that company exists. We actually kind of create a what you have to believe or request for company almost. And then we see, and then we align with the entrepreneurs. That's because, it's since we're operational, we get greater insights, we think, than other investors. And 2, sometimes the companies that are looking to raise money, especially if they talk VC, PE language, that's not necessarily the best opportunity as we see it. And this does borrow from certain asset classes of the search fund model, which I think one of your podcasts mentioned of, an MBA, maybe after a couple of years at a MBB, you go buy a business, maybe a lifestyle business, but you can help scale it. There's components of that into our model. And then the operating partner model of kind of bigger private equity of really creating value add creation. So we think that if we can kind of clean up the red ocean and then find opportunities that are kind of blue ocean, that can create the financial returns and impact that we're looking for. And that's the other way that we can be differentiated. We don't follow the portfolio construction of classic VC of a third home runs, a third strikeouts, a third on base. Most of the companies in our portfolio are going to deliver at least some return. And if a few of them are 10 or 20x, that's great. But we expect to average kind of 3 to 5x, and that kind of gives you that 20+% IRR annually if you just have a lot of good quality free cash flow returning companies after a few years.
Mm-hmm. And within that, you started to allude to your business model and the unique positioning that you're taking here in the space. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So the other differentiation is this operator investor model. And this is why I'm so happy to be speaking with you and the audience of consultants, aspiring consultants, former consultants, is that, and that's who we primarily recruit from. So maybe to explain it, when we invest in a company, we second a team member into the company day to day for a year. So sometimes that means she's going in as a chief of staff, just kind of putting out fires, helping the CEO. Other times it's the new head of our sales team. Sometimes it's a capital raise. And that's why we call it operator investor. We think that, finance is teachable, especially at this level. Money is fungible, but value add is crucial. You need to complement that growth capital with human capital. And yes, we've found historically the best have come from kind of strategy consulting. Now, namely the people that want to do the work after the slides. We found that kind of consulting toolkit, when applied to operations, can be incredibly, incredibly powerful. maybe just with the analogy. So, I spent 3.5 years at Bain here in Johannesburg, but also all around the continent, and to a lesser degree, the world. And we were really good at building the map, right? So here's the map. Here's where you need to go. The map is crucial. I don't take that away. But in these businesses, especially, you need somebody to drive the car. And there's often a human capital gap. The entrepreneurs are great, but it's tough for them to recruit, afford, develop, retain high quality human capital. So this is an opportunity to help design the map, create the strategy pyramid, the 100-day plan, 9-month plan, and then to execute, drive that car. Maybe not drive it, maybe in the passenger seat with the entrepreneur, but that's fundamentally what we do. So we've had 10 operator investors throughout the life cycle that we've had, and the accomplishments that they've had across the portfolio are massive and varied. And they didn't always get it right. We've made a lot of mistakes, but no finger pointing, but a great experience for somebody to kind of leave the consulting world, get their hands dirty while having maybe the pedigree of private equity or former Bain or what have you. So it's been a lot of fun and a great learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know certainly from consultants and ex-consultants that I know, a lot of times what draws people away from the work is that lack of implementation, lack of being able to, as you said, get your hands dirty, actually be involved in the work. And now here you are actually injecting your people into these businesses. So tell us a little bit more about how you do that, your hiring process, whether or not you're hiring now. Do you look for specific people based on the openings that you see within your portfolio? Do you just look for the top quality talent? What's that process look like for you?
Yes, we are hiring now. We should hopefully soon be announcing our next close on our fund. And so we will be hiring 2 more operator investors. So our team will never be that large, and our operator investors won't stay with us for 10 years in the fund. There'll be maybe a couple that will be promoted, but the idea is to have 2 or 3 years cycling through a couple companies, then go on. Often, historically people started their own companies, gone on to bigger PE or joined other startups. The hiring process is, so first starters, I want to let the consulting audience know, I think sometimes as a consultant, there's somebody that left finance, myself, I was a bond analyst, so it wasn't banking, but you kind of felt, it's harder to get back into finance, or it's harder to get into PE if you come from consulting, not IB or such. And that is not the case for us, not to denigrate finance or investment banking, but that skill can be taught. And we've really found that the toolkit of consulting is more helpful. And what we're looking for are the people that do want to do the work after the slides, because there's a lot of like mundane, boring, but important work when you're actually operational, and it can be tough. It's not, this is not fancy dinners by the client. This is sometimes, I've stood in front of a petrol station, a gas station in the U.S. and handed out biltong, samples. And I've done surveys with, hundreds of women in townships to find out, how much they're willing to spend on wigs. I've waited hours for a buyer at Discount to just, take a meeting with me so that we can get our products on the shelves. But if that sounds like fun, or at least, sometimes sounds like fun, that's the role for you. And like I said, we're looking for decathletes, people that can flex a lot of muscles, and maybe not the best modeler or the best X or Y, but we're looking for the best talent stack. Can you do these things? And of course, with that is, yes, EQ is important. Persistence is important. Being able to be, independent is important. And that's why that strategy consulting toolkit is important. Like answer first, pyramid principle, mesiness, all those things that are kind of cliches in the world. They're honestly, I think they're even more important at a operational level, outside of the advisory world.
We'll come back to the show after this brief message. Maximize your chances of landing a top 10 consulting offer by joining Black Belt, Management Consultant's premium case prep program. In Black Belt, you receive one-on-one mentorship and prep support from a former McKinsey, Bain, or BCG consultant. Your coach will develop a personalized plan for you and guide you through drill-based coaching sessions. Black Belt also includes expert resume and cover letter edits. because case prep is only so good if you don't get that interview. And finally, it includes an exclusive group training session led by an ex-McKinsey consultant. Fun fact, 80% of black belts land offers, which is why it's the world's most effective consulting prep program. If you're ready to quit wasting time in your prep process, join today. Limited seats remain for the July cohort of black belt. You can learn more and register at the link in this episode's show notes. Now, let's get back to the show.
And so these owner investors who get to go out into the world, be a part of these portfolio companies, what kind of connection do they still have with you and the core team? And is it, any other training that you help establish with them for them to be successful?
Yeah, so the goal is for them to feel as though they're just as much employees of Secha as they are the portfolio company. We don't always get that right, but that's, aligning incentives so they get deal by deal carry. And we want the entrepreneur and the team to feel like, so I'll use Kuchle. Kuchle is our principal. She was an operator investor at Rush Nutrition. Lara referred to her as an employee of Rush just as much as Secha. So there is a lot of engagement. Maybe again, borrowing from consulting, that is the, if I'm the quote partner, this is the case team leader or what have you. So very involved, much more ideally at the operating company, because that's one of the problems we see with private equity on the continent. Investor usually means investor relations. You're not spending that much time with your portfolio companies. So fundamentally, this is the GPs and the seniors get out of the way for the operating investor to maximize the value add that they can at the portfolio level. And we're a learning organism. We've invested in 11, 12 companies now. So there's a lot of synergies that we've taken lessons. So we're getting better, faster, stronger, codifying those lessons, making sure we apply them across the portfolio. So it very much is a reciprocal relationship with a lot of oversight, but then as much freedom as the operator investor kind of wants, proves that they deserve. And that's the best case scenario for us, where they just feel, they are a principal, not an agent. And that's always what we're trying to solve for. So that, when I was at Bain, did it affect me if, one of our clients, increased profit next year, 5%? No, that was the goal. But our operating investors live and die on monthly management accounts, GP margin expansion, and that's the fun, and it's also why the job can be tough in a way, or emotionally tough in a good way, I think.
So these operator investors, they get to own something. They have agency. They have they make real impact. Is what I'm hearing you saying.
Absolutely, they get to hire people. They get to grow revenue. They get to see the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. And learn every component of a company. Sometimes some areas more than others, but you really leave with the entrepreneurship MBA, and that's what a lot of people are looking for while having a lot of impact.
Well, we are not done with our conversation yet, but I'm sure that there are some of our listeners who are really interested in this operator investor opportunity with you at Secha. For those who are interested, where could they go to learn more?
Yeah, plenty of it. So sechacapital.com, SECHACAPITAL.com. You can email me. Could get lost. It's easier just email, feel free, Brendan at Secha Capital. So BRENDAN, but also the associate handle is really good repository for that. And then just to make me happy, follow us on Twitter, on LinkedIn. We do produce a lot of content out there that we think is a little bit differentiated in the market. So I would always appreciate that. But send us an email. We're happy to chat, especially for people that have listened to this, have done their homework and are excited. Now, I will remind you, we do have a bias, obviously, for local operator investors, so Southern Africa. But we're expanding it, so, hey, especially if we have people here listening from Mozambique, Zambia, Lesotho, Eswatini, that's those are the next few investments. So that'd be great. But, we have had American and European interns before, and some have become operator investors. So not entirely turning that down.
Sure, sure. Well, that helps lead into the next part of the conversation, because I'm sure there are others who are so curious how you got to where you are, right? And I know that part of that journey was a Fuqua MBA. So it's always great to chat with a fellow Fuquan.
Yeah, no, that's the answer, Stephanie. It's entirely Fuqua. It's Kathy Clark and Case I3. What other shout outs could I give? But my dream MBA internship was at a Durham company, SJF Ventures. That was my first foray into kind of the VC world, and that was monumental. And actually, a lot of the Secha operated investor model came from that. I was seconded into one of the SJF portfolio companies for a few weeks when I was a venture fellow for a year, and that was great. And I assumed more VC PE firms would do that, especially on the continent of Africa, where, a lot of the multinationals have hollowed out the management gap, the availability of talent there. And what I thought I'd see at Bain, and I did to a degree, but not as much, of let's get a little bit more operational, because, this is, we're trying to bring, best practices, and we're talking about multiples or, hundreds of percentage points, not basis points, and didn't really see that. It wasn't designed for the local context. And so that's what we're trying to do with Secha, kind of bring first principles, to use a term that nobody else likes, but I do, but kind of a biomimicry approach or biomimetic disruption to an asset class that has otherwise been kind of copy and paste here on the continent. So Fuqua was a great experience. Durham's a beautiful city. And that was the life choice of figuring out where am I going to go. This was 2013, and had an offer in Durham, had an offer in Dubai. And then the opportunity to come to Johannesburg with Bain, and have three very different cities, but a great opportunity. All thanks to Duke.
Oh, absolutely. Tell us a little bit more about that next step then. Your experience at Bain, what made you leave, and how that also helped lead you to where you're at now.
A great experience at Bain, South Africa. I was very lucky as well, or maybe forceful. I got to travel all over the continent and work for very interesting cases, not always just kind of big multinationals, so I enjoyed those. A lot of private equity and due diligence. I think I was able to travel to 12 different countries on the continent.
Wow. with
Bain alone, as well as maybe my favorite story that kind of encapsulates that is, so I'm based in Johannesburg. And I guess I spent about 9 months in Nigeria, but the other country I spent a lot of time in, oddly, was Eswatini, then known as Swaziland, helping the local sugar association. And we were going to Brazil to learn about kind of the modern practices in sugar, ethanol, etc. And there I am, an American passport. I'm in Eswatini, from my office is in South Africa. I had to send my passport to Mozambique to get a last-minute Brazilian visa in order to go over to Brazil for 2 weeks, and that's why I kind of I always think of that, of it incorporates multiple continents, multiple countries, doing really interesting things, and then in a market that we invest in now, not sugar specifically, but took a lot of those lessons from the agricultural value chain, and now one of our principals, Kuhle, who I mentioned earlier, her family works in the sugar industry in Eswatini. So it became kind of a very small world in that regard. So lots of good memories of Bain, but 3.5 years was about right. That was kind of always the plan. I always wanted to get back into, or wanted to get into this. I guess Secha was kind of always the end goal. It helped to refine it, and I couldn't have done it without kind of that toolkit for sure. I mean, like I said, it was Bain 3.5 years. So that's 6+ years ago that I left. We still talk about it, possibly too much, because my co-founder Rashil is, or one of the co-founders, Rashil, is also a Bain alum. We talk about it quite a bit, and we use that lessons. I use the lessons from Bain way more than I use the lessons from kind of finance and working at the hedge fund. So.
Sure. No, I mean, and
very applicable.
In that part of your career journey and pathway, did you? I assume that during your 3.5 years at Bain, you didn't always get to do social sector work, impact investing type work. You're also doing things which were maybe a little bit more just serving for-profit, profit-driven companies. Did you feel any tension about that stage in your life and the knowledge and that you wanted to get back to what you might consider more meaningful work? Maybe you didn't, and that's fine. But I'm curious about that. Especially somebody who started off and you're getting an education in a case, social impact investing type role, and then you decided to go to Bain. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think, I guess I have three components to my answer to that. In one, the goal of Secha is we want to create financial returns because we need to bring in more commercial capital, and we want to kind of grow this asset class and make it replicable. And that's the most ambitious. Like, we can prove that it's kind of adolescent stage or small growing business investing. You can make money as well as impact. That's awesome. So let's have more Sechas out there. Let's get more LPs that are not just DFIs to invest in this space. Like, that's our ultimate goal. So I think returns are a good thing, and I think it's almost easy to be impact. Maybe too easy, though. We like to track jobs and carbon abatement, and obviously the gender lens is very strong. Secondly, probably one of the more quote unquote boring cases I did at Bain, a PMO, project management office, was in retrospect one of the best ways to do it because you saw every component of a company. And so I didn't appreciate that at the time, much like I didn't with some of the other learnings at Bain. But yeah, PMO, you see the importance in interaction of all the major kind of verticals and capabilities within a company, from HR to finance to IT. So that was really edifying. And as our companies get larger, I appreciate that lesson more and more. And then the third is, while I love my experience there, and I've mentioned this to some of my mentors and the partners, I don't feel as though strategy consulting firms here are always built with the local context in mind. I think, I never worked for any of the parastatals that some of the, let you all read the news, but yeah, Bain and McKinsey have gotten in some trouble here down in Southern Africa. And I think some of it's sensationalized, but some of it, I think it's because it's not built for the local context, especially when your primary clients are going to be government related. I think that's tough. And I was lucky not to do that. I got to travel the world primarily, FMCG, agri, and private equity. But to pay the bills, keep the lights on, if you're a big consulting firm, I think there's a disconnect sometimes between that business model and the ability to win clients locally.
Absolutely. Oh, I appreciate you taking a second to think through that potential disconnect that would have been there, as you so well stated. So would love to just wrap up here with a couple of fun, maybe more personal questions. What's a favorite memory of your time at Bain?
Let's see. So, I mentioned from a case, it was maybe that Eswatini sugar where I got to go to Brazil.
Yeah.
But I think maybe the best memory is I'll be kind of cheesy here. My co-founder Rashil Valab and I met on a case with a major FMCG with the Bain Brand Accelerator Toolkit, which I thought was one of the most powerful things we did, and we borrowed heavily from it. And hopefully given them credit, we've told it at Secha, just a very codified toolkit of looking at a brand, but also, kind of any consumer facing company, and then really even a B2B company, in order to kind of do a bunch of analysis if you have enough data, and then really zeroing in on how we can help create value. And that's when I met Rashil. And then a year later, he and I decided to start Secha. And I always like to say that I found two life partners the same week. I proposed to my now wife the same week that Rashil and I decided to start Secha. So hopefully 2 lifelong relationships. So that's a very nice memory there. And yeah, this was a FMCG that also does coffee. So free coffee every day. I mean, free high-end coffee every day. You can't beat that, Stephanie.
You can't beat that.
Exactly.
You can't beat that. And then finally here, what's something that you're consuming, something you're reading or watching right now?
Yeah, you did. You were kind enough to prep me with this question, and I thought I'd throw some books out there that are a little high-minded, and I could and create some bona fides. But I'll pick two things that I think should get the attention that I don't know if they deserve. One, the book is The Bond King by Mary Childs. It's about the rise and fall of Bill Gross of PIMCO. Just a very readable book. It reminds me, not that I was ever this grandiose, but it reminds me of my time on the bond desk when I worked at Putnam Investments. Just a really fun book to read. And the second, a TV show that my wife and I love that I feel like doesn't get enough press. And I want it to exist. It's For All Mankind. It's a show. It's a counterfactual or historical fiction. If the Russians beat the U.S. to the moon, and then the different timeline. It's now in season 3. I just think it's such a good TV show. But I don't see much press about it, so I'm worried it'll be canceled before it's time. So if more people could watch it,
I know it's on
Apple TV, and it's really well done. And it's the nice, it's a little bit of drama, but also kind of that fun historical fiction. So yeah, neither really have much to do with what I do in my day-to-day at Secha, but yeah, more in a personal. These are the things I've been enjoying of late.
No, this is a great opportunity to get to know you and your business and your journey. We've had quite a wide-ranging conversation today. Brendan, really want to thank you again for being willing to join us here. Any other kind of parting words that you have maybe for our audience as we wrap up?
Yeah, no, maybe just to reemphasize, and sorry to pitch my book, but not every private equity firm will say, we don't want financiers. We want the consulting toolkit. And I like emphasizing that you don't always realize when you're entering consulting or leaving it, how much you learn. And we see that every day, myself and people we hire, and how powerful that can be outside of that in the real world. I'm using air quotes because I know consulting is the real world. And so, yeah, I think it's a great, I wish that, I had done that out of undergrad, but I wasn't prestigious enough to get an MBB offer back then. But then you can kind of do great things, and using those skills, in a very directed way can create a ton of impact. And that's what we hope we're doing here at Secha. So we hope that we can hire more and more people that are kind of in the management consulted universe. So please do reach out if this sounds like a fit for you.
Thanks for joining us today. Always a pleasure to talk with a fellow Fuquin and ex-consultant. If you're interested in joining Secha in the work that they do, please check out the link in the show notes and read more at sechacapital.com. And if you're still working on getting into consulting, then please consider working with us here at Management Consulted and one of our coaches. You can always read more at managementconsulted.com and check out a link in the show notes to our platform resources and coaching services to help you get that first job. We'll see you next time.